I followed my husband one night not because I wanted to, not because I was brave, but because something inside me broke so quietly that I didn't even hear it snap. I remember the sound of my own breathing more than anything else. Shallow, careful, like if I inhaled too deeply, the truth would hear me coming and run. That night didn't end my marriage, it ended the woman I used to be, and I never slept the same again. Before the story continues, take a moment to subscribe, like, and share because stories like this aren't just stories. They're warnings, and you never know who might need to hear this tonight. My name is Vanessa Carter. I was 34 years old when my life split into two versions before that night. And everything after. Before, I believed trust was something solid, permanent. After, I learned trust was fragile enough to shatter without making a sound. I had been married to Grant Carter for 12 years. 12 years of shared mornings, shared dinners, shared dreams. We met in our early 20s, when ambition felt romantic and struggle felt temporary. Grant was charming in a quiet way, not loud or flashy, but confident, steady, the kind of man people trusted instinctively, the kind of man I trusted without question. I built a career as a senior interior designer in Chicago, working with high-end clients who wanted perfection. Grant worked in financial consulting, a world of numbers, projections, and polished lies, though I didn't know that last part yet. On paper, we were perfect. Dual incomes, no children by choice. A beautiful loft with floor-to-ceiling windows, and a view of the city that glittered at night like a promise. Our marriage wasn't dramatic. There were no screaming matches, no slammed doors. That's why it took me so long to notice something was wrong. Betrayal doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it whispers. It started with a feeling, a subtle shift I couldn't name. Grant began coming home later than usual. Not alarmingly late, just late enough to feel off. His phone, once casually left on the kitchen counter, was suddenly always face down. Passwords changed, notifications silenced. He still kissed me goodbye every morning, still asked about my day, still smiled, but something behind his eyes had gone distant. Like he was always halfway somewhere else. I told myself I was imagining it. I was tired. Work was stressful. Everyone goes through phases. That's what stable women tell themselves when instability knocks quietly. The first real crack appeared in the form of my jewelry box. It was a simple wooden box lined with velvet, tucked safely in the top drawer of my dresser. I didn't open it often. My jewelry wasn't about display, it was about memory. A diamond necklace my grandmother had given me before she died, a sapphire ring from my mother, gold bracelets from our wedding day. Pieces of my life collected over time. One evening, after a long day with a demanding client, I opened the box without thinking and froze. The necklace was gone. I stared at the empty space longer than I should have, my mind scrambling for explanations. Maybe I'd moved it, maybe I'd worn it recently. Maybe I searched the apartment, the bathroom, the closet, my office. Bag, nothing. When I asked Grant, he didn't hesitate. You probably left it at work, he said calmly, barely looking up from his laptop. Something about how easily the words came unsettled me. But I let it go. I always did. Then another piece disappeared, and another. Each time, he had an answer. Each time, I felt foolish for asking. Each time, I apologized for accusing him without proof. That's how gaslighting works. It doesn't set you on fire. It slowly turns down the lights until you can't see yourself clearly anymore. The nights grew longer. His business trips increased. Client dinners multiplied. Sometimes he smelled different when he came home, same cologne, but heavier, like it had been reapplied to cover something else. I noticed everything and said nothing until the night I followed him. It wasn't planned. That's the part people never understand. I didn't wake up that morning thinking, tonight I'll uncover the truth. I woke up thinking about paint samples and deadlines and what to cook for dinner. It was an ordinary day. That's what makes it terrifying. Grant told me he had a late meeting again. I watched him get ready. Standing in the doorway of our bedroom, he adjusted his tie with more care than usual, checked his reflection twice, smiled at himself. "Not at me, I'll be late," he said. I nodded, but when the door closed behind him, something inside me screamed so loudly I couldn't ignore it anymore. I grabbed my coat, my keys, and followed him. I stayed far enough back to feel invisible, my heart pounding with every red light. He drove confidently, like a man with nothing to hide. He didn't head downtown. He didn't go toward any office building. He parked near a quiet street in Lincoln Park. I pulled over across the road, my hands shaking as I cut the engine. Then I saw her. She stepped out of a boutique jewelry store, laughing, young, blonde, stylish. The kind of woman who hadn't learned yet how cruel life could be. Grant approached her with familiarity that made my stomach drop. He handed her something small, wrapped carefully. She didn't even look surprised. She leaned in close, too close. He laughed. That laugh, soft, intimate, was one I hadn't heard in months. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't confront him. I sat there watching my marriage collapse under a streetlight, feeling something irreversible settle into my bones. When he drove away, I didn't follow this time. I went home. And that was the night I learned that some truths don't just break your heart, they erase your sense of safety. I lay in bed next to him later, staring at the ceiling while he slept peacefully, and realized I would never close my eyes the same way again. Because once you follow someone you love into the truth, there's no way back. And this was only the beginning. I thought the hardest part would be seeing him with her. I was wrong. The hardest part was waking up the next morning and pretending nothing had changed. Even though everything inside me had shifted permanently, the sun rose like it always did, spilling pale light across our bedroom walls, touching the familiar furniture, the familiar life. Grant lay beside me, breathing evenly, his arm resting loosely across my waist as if he still belonged there. I stared at the ceiling, my body rigid, my mind replaying the image of him laughing with another woman under a streetlight that now felt burned into my memory. I didn't sleep, not really. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her smile. Every time I opened them, I remembered where I was. I slipped out of bed quietly, careful not to wake him, and went to the kitchen. The apartment felt different in the early morning, too quiet, too staged, like a set waiting for actors who no longer believed in the script. I made coffee out of habit, though my hands shook as I poured the water. The smell that once comforted me now made my stomach churn. I leaned against the counter and tried to breathe. I told myself not to panic. Panic would make me careless. Careless would make me confront him too soon. And confronting him without proof would only give him another opportunity to twist reality until I doubted myself again. By the time Grant woke up, I was seated at the table, scrolling through emails on my phone like any other morning. He kissed my cheek, asked if I'd slept well. I lied easily. That scared me more than anything. Over the next few days, I became a different kind of woman. On the outside, I was unchanged, professional, composed, affectionate enough to avoid suspicion. On the inside, I was hyper-aware. I noticed everything. The way he angled his phone away from me. The way his voice softened when certain names appeared on his screen. The way he left the room to take calls he used to answer openly. I stopped asking questions. Silence, I learned, made people sloppy. I started documenting things quietly. Dates, times, excuses. I checked our shared calendar and compared it to his late meetings. I reviewed our bank statements more carefully than I ever had before. That was when the pattern emerged. Withdrawals that didn't match our spending habits, transfers made late at night, charges from restaurants I'd never been to, hotels I'd never stayed in, jewelry stores, more than one. The realization settled slowly, like ice forming in my chest. This wasn't just an affair. This was theft. Planned, repeated, intentional. One afternoon, while Grant was out, I opened his laptop. I knew the password once. He changed it. But I also knew him, his patterns, his habits. It took 3 tries. When the screen unlocked, my hands went cold. Emails, reservations, receipts. Conversations that were professional on the surface and intimate just beneath it. A woman named Lily, 26, marketing consultant, according to her signature. Their messages weren't graphic. They didn't need to be. Familiarity radiated from every line. Inside jokes, shared frustrations, plans. I closed the laptop before I could break down. I needed clarity, not chaos. That night, when Grant came home late again, he complained about work, about pressure, about responsibility. I listened, nodding, offering sympathy, playing my role perfectly. He looked at me with appreciation, unaware that every word he spoke added another nail to the coffin of our marriage. The gaslighting intensified once he sensed I was pulling away emotionally. "You've been distant," he said one evening, his tone concerned. "Are you okay?" I almost laughed. Instead, I shrugged. "Just tired." He reached for my hand. "You know you can talk to me, right?" The irony burned. I realized then that he truly believed he was in control, that he could continue this double life indefinitely, that my silence meant ignorance. That's when I decided to get help. I didn't tell my friends. I didn't tell my colleagues. I called Clara Jensen, a private investigator whose name I'd heard whispered among wealthy clients who needed truths uncovered discreetly. She answered on the second ring. "I think my husband is stealing from me," I said. My voice was steady. "And I think he's having an affair." She didn't sound surprised. She asked questions. Precise ones. Dates, names, behaviors. When I finished, there was a pause. "You're not crazy," she said finally. "And you're not wrong. I'll find the proof." Those words loosened something inside me. For the first time since that night, I felt grounded. The following weeks were torture. Clara worked quietly, efficiently. Meanwhile, I had to maintain the illusion of normalcy. Grant grew bolder and more careless. He stopped hiding his late nights as carefully. He smiled more, lighter, freer. It disgusted me. One evening, I noticed my mother's pearl bracelet was missing. I didn't mention it. I simply wrote it down. When Clara called again, her voice carried weight. "Vanessa, I have bank records, transaction histories, surveillance photos. He's been selling your jewelry, not all at once, piece by piece, and he's using the money on her." I closed my eyes, even though I'd suspected it. Hearing it confirmed hurt in a way I hadn't prepared for. Those weren't just objects, they were pieces of my history. He hadn't just betrayed me emotionally, he'd erased parts of my past to fund his fantasy. "There's more," Clara continued. "He's been moving money into an account under a different name. He's careful, but not careful enough." When I hung up, I sat alone in the living room for a long time. I didn't cry. I felt hollow, stripped, like a house after a fire still standing, but changed forever that night. Grant came home in an unusually good mood. He poured wine, talked about a possible promotion, about our future, about a trip we should take together. I watched him, realizing how easily he lied, how naturally, and I understood something vital. If I confronted him now, he would deny everything. He would cry, apologize, promise change. And nothing would happen. I didn't want apologies. I wanted truth, consequences, closure. So I made a decision that frightened me with its clarity. I would not confront him yet. I would wait. I would gather everything, every receipt, every message, every betrayal until there was no escape, no explanation, no version of reality where he wasn't exposed completely. And as I lay in bed beside him that night, staring into the darkness, I realized something else. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was angry. And anger, when controlled, is power. There's a moment after heartbreak when the tears dry up, not because the pain is gone, but because something colder replaces it. For me, that moment came quietly on an ordinary Tuesday morning, while I was standing in front of the bathroom mirror brushing my teeth beside a man who had already stolen pieces of my soul. I watched my own reflection instead of his. My eyes looked different, clearer, sharper. The woman staring back at me wasn't broken anymore. She was awake. From that day forward, I stopped reacting and started calculating that Grant thought he had. Regained control, my silence reassured him, my calm disarmed him. He mistook my restraint for forgiveness, my composure for weakness. He didn't realize that every affectionate gesture I returned was strategic, every smile measured, every word chosen carefully. I was no longer his wife in the way he understood. I was an observer inside my own marriage, documenting the slow unraveling of a man who believed he was untouchable. Clara worked in the background like a shadow. She sent me updates in coded language, careful not to leave a trail. Photos of Grant entering hotels with Lily, receipts for jewelry sales, screenshots of transfers between accounts, patterns that, when laid out together, told a story so clear. It was almost cruel. He wasn't just cheating. He was constructing an entirely separate life, financed by my memories, my trust, my silence. At work, I thrived, my focus sharpened. Clients praised my attention to detail, unaware that the same precision guiding their designs was being used to dismantle my marriage piece by piece. There was something empowering about channeling my pain into productivity. It reminded me that I was still capable, still strong, still in control of something, even when my personal life felt like a carefully staged lie. Grant, on the other hand, began to grow careless. He stopped double-checking his stories. He reused excuses. Sometimes he forgot which version he told me. I watched him trip over his own lies and said nothing. Silence gave him space to hang himself. One evening, he casually mentioned Lily's name without realizing it. "She's really sharp," he said, pouring himself a drink. "I mean one of the consultants I work with." I raised an eyebrow, just slightly. Oh, he froze for half a second, recovered. "Yeah, you'd like her." I smiled. "I'm sure." That night, while he slept peacefully beside me, I stared at the ceiling and let the anger settle into something precise. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to make sure that when this ended, there would be no ambiguity about what he had done or who he had become. I met my mother for lunch that weekend. Evelyn Carter had spent decades as an attorney specializing in family and estate law. She was sharp, composed, and emotionally disciplined in a way I had always admired. I hadn't planned to tell her everything yet, but once I started, the words spilled out. The jewelry, the affair, the money, the lies. She listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she took a sip of her tea and looked at me carefully. "You don't want revenge," she said. "You want justice." I nodded, but I won't pretend I don't want him to feel it. She didn't judge me for that. Then we proceed carefully, emotionally detached, legally precise. From that point on, everything became methodical. We secured copies of every document Clara had gathered. Multiple backups, digital and physical. My mother connected me with a forensic accountant who verified the financial manipulation. We began preparing divorce filings that included theft, fraud, and misappropriation of marital assets. Each step felt surreal, like I was planning someone else's life collapse, but it was my life he'd stolen from first. Meanwhile, Grant continued his performance. He brought home flowers one night, unprompted. Suggested a weekend getaway. Talked about reconnecting. I realized then that Lily wasn't enough for him. He needed me too. My stability, my image, my silence. The realization disgusted me. One afternoon, Clara called with an update that made my pulse steady instead of spike. I spoke to Lily. She said. My breath caught. And she didn't know everything. She thought he was separated. She's young Vanessa, and she's scared. I wasn't surprised. Men like Grant rarely tell the truth to anyone. Clara continued. She's willing to cooperate if things escalate. She has messages, gifts, proof. I closed my eyes. Another layer peeled away. That night, I watched Grant across the dinner table and felt something strange pity. Not for what he was about to lose, but for how small he truly was beneath the charm, beneath the lies. He thought he was clever. He thought he was winning. He had no idea the game was already over. I began distancing myself emotionally in ways that were subtle enough not to alert him. Fewer questions, shorter responses, polite affection instead of warmth. He noticed. Of course, insecurity crept into his voice. "You okay?" he asked more often. "Just busy," I replied. He started trying harder, which only confirmed how dependent he was on my presence to validate his double life. As the evidence mounted, my fear evaporated. In its place grew a calm certainty. I knew exactly how this would end. I knew where. I knew when. I chose a Saturday, a controlled environment, familiar faces, witnesses who mattered. Not a dramatic explosion, but a precise unveiling, truth laid bare without theatrics. The night before, I packed an overnight bag not to leave, but to remind myself that I could, that I wasn't trapped, that this was a choice, not a reaction. I slept better that night than I had in weeks. Because once you stop crying, once you stop hoping someone will change, once you stop needing answers from the person who hurt you, clarity replaces fear, and clarity is dangerous. Grant still thought tomorrow would be just another day. He had no idea it would be his last day pretending he was innocent. The morning everything ended began like any other. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows of our loft, touching the furniture we'd chosen together. The walls we'd painted in neutral tones meant to suggest calm. Grant stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his cufflinks, humming softly, unaware that this was the last time he would wake up believing his lies were safe. I watched him from the doorway, memorizing the moment not out of love, but out of finality. There's something surreal about knowing you're standing at the edge of a life you'll never step back into. I didn't feel nervous. I didn't feel angry. I felt steady. "You're quiet today," he said casually, glancing at me through the mirror. "Just thinking," I replied. He smiled. "About us." I met his eyes in the reflection. Something like that. He left for what he believed was a normal Saturday meeting. He had no idea what I had planned for that evening. Or rather, he had no idea how thoroughly I had planned it. By noon, I had everything ready. The documents were organized neatly in a leather folder: bank statements, transaction records, photos, receipts, timelines. Clara had triple-checked everything. My mother had reviewed the legal filings one final time. The locks on my personal accounts had been changed, his access revoked. The groundwork was complete. All that remained was the truth. I spent the afternoon cooking, not because I wanted to, but because routine kept my hands steady. I chose familiar dishes, comfort food. I wanted the environment to feel safe, disarming. That was important. Truth lands harder when people aren't expecting it. By early evening, the guests arrived. My parents, Grant's parents, his sister, a few close family friends, people who had watched our relationship grow from the beginning, who believed in us. Grant arrived last, smiling, confident, playing the role perfectly. "You went all out," he said, kissing my cheek. "What's the occasion?" I smiled back. Just felt like bringing everyone together. Dinner unfolded smoothly. Laughter, conversation, stories from the past. Grant was charming, relaxed, unaware that every moment was carrying us closer to the edge. I watched him closely, not with hatred, but with curiosity. How long could a man live inside a lie without realizing it was collapsing? After dessert, I stood. "I want to say something," I said calmly. The room quieted. Grant looked at me, surprised but unbothered. He reached for his wine glass. I placed the folder on the coffee table. "Grant," I continued, my voice even, "I followed you one night." His hand paused midair. "I followed you because things didn't feel right anymore. Because pieces of my life were disappearing literally and figuratively. And because I needed the truth." The room was silent now. "I found out about Lily," I said, "about the jewelry, about the money, about the lies." Grant stood abruptly. "Vanessa, this isn't, sit down," I said softly. Something in my tone stopped him. I opened the folder and slid the first document across the table. Then another, photos, receipts, bank records, dates, amounts. "You sold my grandmother's necklace," I said, "my mother's bracelet. You used the money to fund an affair while telling me I was imagining things." His face drained of Color. I have copies of everything. I continued. Your accounts are frozen. Divorce papers have already been filed. Theft and fraud are being reviewed. His mother gasped. His father stared at him in disbelief. Grant tried to speak, tried to explain, tried to cry. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult him. I didn't ask why. I loved you, I said simply. But I won't protect you from the consequences of your choices. The silence afterward was heavy, final. Later, after the guests left, after lawyers were contacted. After Grant packed a bag and walked out of the loft with nothing but his shame, I sat alone in the quiet. The city lights blinked outside the window like they always had, but I felt different, lighter and burdened. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. Some people think revenge is loud, explosive, emotional. They're wrong. Real revenge is calm. It's letting the truth speak while you walk away intact. I never slept the same again after the night I followed my husband, but I slept better because the woman who woke up after betrayal was stronger than the one who had gone to bed trusting blindly, and that woman, she was finally safe. If this story moved you, shocked you, or made you see trust differently, please like, subscribe, and share. Stories like this aren't just entertainment, they're reminders to listen to your instincts and protect your worth.